Extreme Monsters, Book 3, Meet Mr. Hydeous, Chapter 9, The Hydeous Rescue. Mumford didn't have much time to think about the real identity of Mr. Hydeous, because speed ice climbing came next. Mumford and the other 9 ice climbers had 6 minutes to study the ice wall, a frozen natural waterfall as high as a 6-story building and 20 feet across. 2 climbers would scale the ice wall on similar side-by-side vertical courses. Mumford knew they would not only be climbing against each other, but would be timed against all the others in the event. The challenge for Mumford was to climb to the top of the 75-foot ice fall and touch his axe to his finish point. The finish point held a mechanical timer that would recognize his speed to 1/100th of a second. The climber with the best time would win. Mumford and Mr. Hydeous had drawn the first ascent, so they would be climbing side by side. T-Rex fortunately would be the category judge. T-Rex checked Mumford's neutralizer wristband. Then he checked the wristband worn by Mr. Hydeous. From up close, Mumford watched Mr. Hydeous take another drink from his sports bottle. Can that really be Gerald? Mumford wondered. Can he actually be taking his own formula? But Gerald hadn't mentioned any transformation. He just said this formula would make Mumford win. And a monster would have to wear a neutralizer wristband to compete anyway. So what would be the point of transforming into a monster? And Mumford already was a monster. It doesn't make sense, Mumford told himself firmly. So quit worrying about nothing and start planning your climbing strategy. Mumford clipped the belaying rope to his harness. The rope was threaded through 2 metal rings called carabiners at the top of the wall. The rope led down to the ground, to Steiner, who was Mumford's belayer. Steiner would pull on the rope if Mumford started to fall. Mumford glanced over at Mr. Hydeous and his belayer, Cletus Sline. Their breaths puffed into the air and were whipped away by an icy wind. Mumford grinned at Steiner. Despite Cletus's warm hat and coat and his protective helmet, Mumford could see the green team was shivering. He was so cold he was wearing gloves, which would interfere with the slime that oozed from his palms. That means he won't be able to use that ooze to cheat for Team Pendant, Mumford thought with satisfaction. Mumford was wrapped in bandages as well as warm winter gear, almost felt sorry for Cletus. Mumford and Mr. Hydeous stood at the top of the ice fall with 1 foot on the wall. T-Rex said, "Ready?" Mumford and Hydeous both nodded. T-Rex called, "Attention!" Then, after a second's pause, he shouted, "Go!" As Mumford began to climb, Steiner pulled the rope against his harness to keep it out of the way of Mumford's pointed axe. But Steiner was careful not to pull the rope too taut. It was there only to catch the young mummy if he fell. If Steiner pulled it tight enough to aid Mumford in his climb, Mumford would be disqualified. Up close, the ice was a pockmarked jumble of folds and holes. Mumford stared up, looking for ridges for his crampons and indentations for his ice axes. He swung his left axe into a tight arc, planting it in a deep-looking pocket. He lifted with his right leg and dug the inside edges of his crampon into the ice. When it caught, he planted his right axe and stepped up with his left foot. He climbed like a fly up a wall, rising from ridge to ridge, until he was resting precariously on his crampons 25 feet above the ground. Mumford was now as high as the top of the plastic icefall Doc had built. This icefall was 3 times that, but all his patience was paying off. Mumford wasn't even breathing hard. Yet, 50 feet up, Mumford was beginning to feel the strain. His calves burned and his forearms ached. He swung and planted his right axe. Then, without warning, his left axe popped out of his pocket. He lurched backwards and nearly slipped, but his right axe held. Chunks of ice rained down, bouncing around Steiner and glancing off his helmet. Mumford hung from his axe and studied the wall. There, to the left, he spotted a crevice. He teetered on the front point of his crampons, planted his left axe in the crack, and continued to climb. And then, not 10 feet ahead, Mumford could see the finish point. He was almost there. He chanced a quick glance toward Mr. Hydeous. Hydeous was right behind him and seemed to be slowing. Mumford saw Hydeous pull a small bottle from his coat and drink from it. The green tint surged upward and drew level with Mumford. Then, as Mr. Hydeous passed Mumford, he sneered into the young mummy's eyes. At that moment, Mumford was suddenly certain Mr. Hydeous was Gerald. Now Mumford got mad. He would ace it anyway, he decided. He would beat Gerald, no matter what. He wouldn't let that cheater win. Adrenaline surged through Mumford's arms and legs. He planted his axes with new vigor. He dug in his crampons with increased confidence. He was catching up. He was ahead. 5 feet from the finish point. 4. To his right, he heard a yelp. Mumford glanced over as Hydeous' right axe slipped, and Hydeous hung precariously 70 feet above the ground. Hydeous' green skin had paled to aqua. His legs and arms were shaking. As Hydeous fumbled in his coat pocket, his right axe slipped from his hand and tumbled toward the ground. He's lost, Mumford told himself, but he'll be safe. There's a belaying rope. Don't worry about him. Just climb. You're almost there. A loud thunk echoed from far below, followed by the moan of the crowd. The flat head of Hydeous' axe had bounced off Cletus Line's helmet. Cletus had slumped to the ground, and he had dropped the belaying rope. Hydeous had the bottle almost to his lips when his crampons broke loose. He was dangling by a single axe, and Mumford could see his hand was beginning to slip. Mumford slammed both axes into the ice as hard as they could go, but he let go of his left axe and pulled the neutralizer wristband up over his right hand. Now he would be able to use his monster powers. He grabbed his left axe again and flung out his right arm. Sticky bandages unraveled. They whipped toward Mr. Hydeous and grabbed the would-be monster, just as his hand slipped and he began to fall. At the end of Mumford's bandage, Mr. Hydeous jerked to a stop. The sticky bandage held Hydeous securely, and Mumford clung to the wall with axe and crampons, trying desperately to balance the additional weight. What now? He thought. He knew his bandages weren't long enough to lower Mr. Hydeous to safety. Dangling at the end of Mumford's bandage, Hydeous tried again to get the bottle to his mouth, but he was shaking violently. He slammed into the icefall, and the bottle dropped from his hand. Down, down it tumbled. It bounced off Cletus's back as he lay unconscious in the deep snow. Suddenly, Mumford realized his reaction had taken only seconds. The people below, who were still staring at Cletus, hadn't seen what was happening up the wall. "Take!" Mumford yelled down to Steiner the signal to pull the rope taut. "Oh," Steiner said, looking up then. "Holy crow!" He took up the slack in the belay rope, tugging it tight against Mum's harness. "What are you waiting for?" Steiner yelled to the others. "Help him!" Wide-eyed and confused, the rest of the team stared up at Mumford and Mr. Hydeous, dangling at the end of the bandage. "That looks like Gerald," Jinx muttered. "Sort of," Wolf agreed, "but with green skin and tusks." "I don't care if he's Santa Claus," Steiner yelled. "Quit gawking and do something." Jinx snapped her fingers, and her wand appeared in her hand. She said, "Good deed trumps a nasty trick. Let Mumford's axe and crampons stick." "Thanks, Jinx," Mumford called down to her. He was glad Steiner was holding the belay rope, but with the extra weight of Hydeous pulling him, he felt even safer with her magic anchoring his axe and crampons firmly in place. Jinx frowned as Hydeous swung back and forth 70 feet above the ground, trembling and shaking. He looked really sick. "I'd keep out from underneath that jerk if I were you," she said to Val as he leaped into the air. "I hear you," Val said. Heeding her warning, Val flew at the dangling Hydeous and grabbed him from behind. "You can let go, Mum," Val said. Obeying Mumford's mental command, the sticky bandages unwrapped from around Hydeous and rewrapped themselves around Mumford's arm. Val dropped toward the ground, carrying Team Pendant's champion. He lowered the trembling, twitching Hydeous into Wolf's arms. Looking down at the shaking boy, Val realized that Wolf and Jinx had been right. With every passing second, Mr. Hydeous looked more like Gerald. He had shrunk into Gerald's size. His shaggy hair was blonde, though it still had purple streaks. His eyes weren't light blue yet, but they were no longer monster red either. His skin was only slightly green. His ears were almost round, and his tusks barely overlapped his upper lip. "I thought Gerald was human," Val muttered. Thoroughly confused, he flew up once again and hovered watchfully while Steiner lowered Mumford. Wolf had laid Gerald on the snow beside Cletus. Cletus, who had been saved by his helmet, was starting to regain his senses. Mumford unhooked the belay rope from his harness. "I used my powers, so I forfeited the race," he said to his teammates. "I couldn't think what else to do. I'm sorry."